te kaunihera o Rotorua mo te hui tuatahi o te tau. Welcome back to the Rotorua Lakes Council for our first meeting of the year for the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting on the 3rd of February. I'd like to welcome everyone present and also through Zoom. Welcome Sandra, Councillor Kaifong. This meeting is being live streamed, and just a reminder to make sure that your mobile phones are off or on silent, please. We should have a morning break about 11 a.m. I would like to invite Her Worship the Mayor to open our first meeting with the karakia.
Kia ora and welcome everybody. Tūtaua mai ronga, oh we don't have to stand. Tūtaua mai raro, tūtaua mai roto, tūtaua mai I wahoa kia tauai te Māori tū, te Māori ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tai kie.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I'd like to call for any apologies. Yes, Councillor Donaldson.
Councillor Yates for lateness, Madam Chair.
She's bang on time. Thank you. And Councillor Wang will be joining us very shortly. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Ms Spray and seconded by Mr Waru. And sorry, we also had an apology from Mr Hurd, so we'll take that noted. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest today? There appear to be none. Any? Oh, yes, Councillor Maxwell. Yes, thank you very much, Councillor Maxwell. Well deserved indeed. Congratulations, Your Worship.
Thank you.
Were there any urgent items not on the agenda? Yes, Mr Waru.
Just more of a point of clarification, really, because there's some things in the confidential part that I don't know if I should declare now or declare in that part.
You're welcome to declare in the confidential if it's a item, and then we can clarify whether it even needs to be declared. Yeah.
Just making sure so I didn't get caught at the end. Kia ora.
No, thank you. Councillor Bentley, did you have an item?
No, it's just exactly the same question I asked at the first meeting last year, was if our leadership group could talk to MSD and stop homeless people being bussed into Rotorua. It hasn't changed in a year.
Point of order, we had that clarified and we have a meeting with MSD on Friday, but we've been given the assurance that that is not the case.
Okay. Were there any other items, Councillor Bentley? Or? No. There appear to be no other items, so we will move on to the confirmation of minutes for the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting on the 2nd of December. May I please have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Yates, that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting, minutes 2nd December 2021, be confirmed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you. And we now move to our first presentation for today. I would like to invite Andrew up to the table, and he will give us a verbal update on summer 2021 to 2022, reflections on Rotorua trading and activity. Welcome, Andrew.
Good morning, Kia ora. All right. So look, I've got a few notes, which I'll just kind of work my way quietly through. I think JP is going to join me. We may do a bit of a, at the conclusion, a little bit of a kind of a, we haven't prepared anything, but a bit of a twin act in terms of what it means sort of looking forward in terms of the year ahead. So look, I think firstly, sort of thank you for the opportunity to kind of share a few thoughts in terms of and insights ahead, taking a bit of an economic and business lens for our local community. Safe to say at a broad level, 2022 is looking really challenging. There's certainly some rocky conditions ahead that we certainly business and the wider community are going to need to navigate. You probably all saw this week the recent release of inflation figures. They were certainly as ugly as were expected. Consumer prices rose by 1.4% in the December quarter, which lifted annual inflation rate to 5.9%. Now, that's the highest rate that we've seen since 1990. And if you actually think what drove 1990, it was the increase in GST. So certainly this is a pretty high number that we haven't seen for a long period of time. What's been driving it? Largely it's been fueled by that sort of potent cocktail of supply and demand pressures. Worldwide, the effects of COVID-19 have led to huge disruptions in manufacturing and supply chains. This high demand for physical goods instead of services. So I think all of us have probably experienced it in one shape or form, heading into a shop and trying to buy a new TV or a fridge and finding that your options are somewhat limited. Rising materials costs, extreme pressure on global shipping capacity. So again, there's a real issue in terms of containerised goods circulating the globe, and the prices on that shipping have gone through the roof. Prices of tradable goods, so that's the other kind of measure, have risen by 6.9% over the last year, so they've actually outstripped the inflationary number. Supply side has collided with really strong domestic demand. So the New Zealand economy, notwithstanding the pain that the tourism sector is continuing to suffer, rebounded really quickly after those initial COVID lockdowns in 2020. And by mid-21, activity was running well above pre-pandemic levels. As a result, domestic prices are being pressured higher, and the demand for workers has surged as the border closure has restrained growth in the workforce. So we've got a bit of a perfect storm kind of growing there. Look, New Zealand has been far from alone in terms of these inflationary consequences. This is a global issue, and it's playing out globally. Our successful COVID elimination strategy in 2020 saw economic activity rebound faster than most economies, which was bolstered by generous monetary policy and one of the largest government spending packages in the world as a share of GDP. So certainly they threw the book at it, so to speak. And as a result, as we're kind of as we were nearing the end of 2021, there was certainly growing evidence that we'd reached a point where the economy was almost starting to overheat. The last piece of this kind of inflation picture really is wage growth. And so for an initial kind of price shock to turn into sustained inflation, which is obviously one of those ones that we're wanting to avoid, there needs to be a feedback loop between consumer prices and other prices in the economy, most importantly the price of labour. And when the job market is tight, the conditions are ripe for that feedback loop to take hold. The figure yesterday at 3.2% unemployment is sort of the lowest figure we've seen in New Zealand since at least 1986. So again, we've got another, really staggeringly low data point there. Stories of labour shortages are widespread. It's a really common, and even locally talking with businesses, they're all kind of reporting this is now the biggest constraint they've got in terms of continued growth. And that's across all sectors as well. It's important to kind of note. That tight labour market is beginning to push wages up. So wage inflation, which is measured by the Labour Cost Index for all salary and wage rates, was 2.6% in the year up to the December 21 quarter. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to kind of go that clearly that rate of wage growth is not keeping up with the rate of inflation. And so people are really starting to feel that. So when you start to think about all of these kind of factors, and the resulting increases in the OCR and interest rates over the coming 12 months, it really kind of highlights this kind of good news, bad news state that we're kind of in at the moment. And that's the kind of the broader picture. Look, you talk to a whole lot of economists, you'll get a different opinion in terms of what this really means and how this will really play out. Certainly pretty divided in terms of what opinions are. I think when you add in the complexity of, obviously, we're going to have some more COVID-induced costs over the next few months with this pandemic continuing to play out, and likely to be high levels of absenteeism from work and so forth. There's some challenges there. There's some continued challenges around staged border reopenings and what that means in terms of inflows and outflows of people. It's a complex situation, and I think it just, again, I sort of come back to that earlier point that we've certainly got some rocky conditions ahead in terms of what it means for our local community and our local businesses. Locally, obviously this presentation was titled Summer 21-22. Locally, it's been an interesting kind of summer period. We're still in it, I guess, is the other kind of comment to make. We've obviously got another long weekend coming up this weekend, which we're hopeful will continue to be positive and busy. And certainly it's a point that would make that the red traffic light setting doesn't mean don't travel. The red traffic light setting means you've just got to take a little bit more care, and we just need to make sure that we're managing obviously larger gatherings. December, off the back of those Auckland lockdowns, was really tough, and certainly from a tourism hospitality perspective, it was a very tough set of trading conditions leading into Christmas. They had I think people arrived around about the kind of 26th, 27th of December, and the town had a really good buzz on through that kind of following period for a good couple of weeks. It has fallen away pretty rapidly though, which I think reflects that kind of move back down those kind of traffic light settings, and certainly if you look around the country, everyone's reporting a fairly similar sort of story. On the other side of the equation, look, a lot of businesses took the time to actually just shut down over Christmas and do a lot of delayed maintenance. I know talking with some of the wood processing sector, there was, they had some significant shutdowns just to get stuff fixed and to install new plant, which is positive to hear. But certainly that sector, along with the construction, manufacturing, has been going gangbusters over the last sort of 6 months, and certainly all indicators point to that continuing to be really strong over 2022. Alongside that, obviously we've got a forecast record payout for the dairy sector, which is really positive news. We know how important that is in terms of rippling through the rest of the economy. But I certainly, all of those kind of sectors that have a relatively positive outlook are all sort of continuing to report those similar constraints that are impacting us at a national level. Supply chains, workforce, and so forth are big challenges. So I guess the so what question, and that's the big one for us is, and the one that we've probably spent the time since we've come back from Christmas really pondering is, what does this really mean for the work that we're doing as both between my team and JP's team to support local business and the local economy. And that's one that we've kind of gone back and really kind of questioned ourselves in terms of, are all the pieces of work that are underway at the moment the right pieces of work? Are they going to have an appropriate impact in terms of actually really trying to adjust for some of these things? And I guess that's a work in progress. We haven't got all the answers yet, I think is probably the safe thing to say. It has meant we've been able to go back through and just reconfirm actually some of our strategies were correct. So things like the destination management plan that we put a lot of energy into last year, we've certainly rechecked in on that, and that continues to be our strategy in terms of what we're doing in that space. We've actually probably geared up, if anything, the work that we're doing around workforce at the moment, and so there's a couple of new programs that are getting launched in that space. We've been talking with MSD, who are kindly supporting a very tourism hospitality targeted piece of work, which we'll look forward to announcing over the coming months. That's probably enough from me, because you don't want to hear me drone on for too long, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything, JP.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillors, I suppose just continuing that theme of the good news, bad news strapline that Andrew sort of identified there. Look, we've been reporting to you that the market response to housing needs and housing supply has been extremely positive. We've seen a lot more subdivisions, we're seeing a lot more homes built, and that theme will continue into the presentation we do later in the operations and monitoring report. But again, that's being challenged by the headwind of supply chains, escalating prices for people, and obviously the availability to get construction done. So that again carries into those sectors where we actually are seeing new investment in businesses. The ability to get GIB to finish a construction project, or to actually get the employees to expand a workforce, is also a significant challenge. So whilst we have some positive elements coming through, the global picture and those challenges around supplies and people remain a constant headwind for some of the positive things that are happening across the district and clearly across the country and across the world.
Well, thank you very much, guys. Are there any questions for them? Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, good morning, Andrew. Good morning, JP. Must be difficult sometimes when you have to report like that, you know. And I think we all would love to see a more positive outlook out there. And sometimes that's just the way it is. But my question is directly towards how the red light settings have come, you know. Sometimes it belies the figures that FPOS New Zealand gave us, and that was that trade was quite good in the Bay of Plenty. But I feel for the hospitality sector, especially because they are the ones that really struggled, and I can't seem to understand how some of them would be actually surviving with the lack of staff and also the lack of patronage. So my question directly is, Tourism New Zealand have invested very heavily in through lots of TikTok channels, YouTube channels, try something new, go somewhere new. So we in Queenstown, we are old hats. How did we combat that, or what is our process for that? Of course, today might be some positive announcement, but what are we, how are we going to combine that going forward?
Look, through the Chair, so we, I'll try and make this a short answer. So look, that's a really core part of the work that our team does on a day-to-day basis. And so we obviously do a lot of destination marketing activity into those kind of key markets of Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch, and obviously the broader, Bay of Plenty and Waikato as well. If I think back over the last 12 months in particular, I think typically pre-COVID we would have run a couple of larger campaigns kind of orientated around kind of, spring and autumn, which were generally the kind of shoulder periods. Over the last 12 months, we ran campaigns non-stop. And I think the team actually pumped out around sort of 6 different, marketing campaigns. They're all very targeted, heavily digital. You obviously don't see them as locals, because if you're seeing a lot of it as locals, we're probably not doing our job very well. But they are certainly on and out there in the marketplace on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, followed by Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Comment first, and then a question. Andrew, you talked about inflation, and I think one that will concern us in future meetings is interest rate rises and where they're going, and the effect of that on council-funded projects, such as I'm thinking about, funding for sewerage schemes and the like. But my question around, you made the comment about red light doesn't mean you can't travel, but it's certainly knocked people's confidence. And a bit along the lines of Councillor Kumar's question about marketing strategies, my concern is around the events sector. Events create a purpose to go somewhere. It's not just taking a pick of which looks best in a marketing strategy, but it's actually in something that's happening that you go to a destination for. And so our events sector have taken a huge pounding, and we see events being postponed or cancelled continually. So do we look ahead to our event strategy? Does that need a revamp? Do we need to have some sort of forum with our events industry to build back the confidence for them going forward? And do we see value in events going forward as a reason for people to visit here and for industry to be based here.
There's a bit to unpack in there. Through the chair, obviously we do see huge value on events, and I think your description in terms of they do, they're a really significant driver of visitation in terms of participation and also people coming to experience, something a little bit different. Yes, we have been doing some thinking in terms of the event strategy space overall. And what that should look like going into the future. I should flag that technically we aren't an events team, and so it's not in our mandate to actually look after events, so that remains a council function. But certainly, as it relates to the visitor economy, we do, identify just how critical it is in terms of filling up, bed nights, ensuring that we've got, vibrant kind of hospitality outlets and so forth. So it is really critical. The qualifier givers courses that we do, we continue to operate as the kind of the convention bureau for the destination, and I think our observation would be, that's a sector that's going to be really competitive after, we come through this next sort of wave. There's a lot of new facilities getting opened up around the country. But in saying that, we think actually there's some things that we offer that nowhere else does, and we'll be really chasing that space hard. Those delegate nights are certainly things that, really contribute really positively to the local economy.
Yeah, thank you. And that was a great question. Thanks, Councillor Donaldson. It has been a very tough summer, not only for Rotorua, but for the entire country, with a number of major events having to be postponed or cancelled. But very relevant question. Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koutou o tira, through you, Madam Chair. Me mihi ka tika ki a koe te mare kura ka tika te kōrero tā Uncle Trev ki a koe, me tana mihi ki a koe. So thank you also for opening this morning i te karakia. Hea anō, kia koe, Andrew, o tira JP, tēnā kōrua. I'd like to first probably pick up on something that Councillor Bentley started with, and then Councillor Kuma also alluded to in his kōrero. But that was pretty much around our brand Rotorua. While some people might think our brand has been tarnished over the time, I don't believe it has. So that's my statement for this morning. I actually believe that we've got a very strong brand, and as Keith Garrett in his letter to the editor wrote, we're progressive. Well, that was the observation by his visitors that came to town. So that also has a lot to do with the work that you and your team are doing, Andrew. Me mihi ka tika ki a koe. Another comment that I'd like to make, because we're all members of our community, is that we support local. That we are actually leading by supporting local, visiting our local eateries, visiting our local tourism destinations, because without us, they will crumble. So back to the brand, it's important that brand Rotorua is intact, and I know that it is. Whilst we've had events cancelled over this time, I'm confident that with Aronui coming up in 2 weeks, bit of a plug here, make sure we're getting our tickets, please, because we are not cancelling. We're in red light, which only means 100 packs, so all of our events are ready to go. Koira no hotaku, but nei rā te mihi kia koutou koto tima, Andrew.
Kia ora, Councillor Yates. Were there any other questions? Yes, Mr Waru.
Tēnā koe te tia mana o tira tātou katoa mōrena. JP, Andrew, hope you had a good holiday, if you got one. Hoi anō kai te miha tira ki a kōrua. Thanks for the update. Kai te aroha nui ati au ki a tātou, because as you mentioned around supply and stuff, I'm involved with a few big projects around here and outside of Rotorua as well, and things that used to take 4 days to get here are taking 4 months. So that's what we're dealing with at the moment. So hard to progress when those kind of obstacles are in front of us. Hoi anō, you mentioned the destination management plan, Andrew, and I'm quite passionate about that plan. I'm just wondering, when are we going to start getting some runs on the board with that plan? Kia ora.
Through the chair, so I guess there's a couple of things that have happened since Christmas. So we've actually appointed a project lead for that piece of work. So that's Melissa Craig, who been involved with our organisation in the past, but more recently has been involved heavily with Zorb, and so she's a really good asset in terms of helping to lead that work forward. As I kind of alluded to, one of the areas we've kind of targeted to make some gains on straight away was in that workforce space. So we we have agreed with MSD to do a piece of work which designs a new program and actually gets a pilot set up over the next sort of 2 to 3 months. So certainly that's the one that we've really sort of picked apart the key challenges that those local businesses are kind of facing in relation to workforce and designing something that's actually going to meet the needs of business. Yeah.
Tēnā koe.
Thank you. And final question from Her Worship the Mayor.
Thank you, and thank you. It's nice you both coming together. I think your reflections, Andrew, absolutely mimic what we've all seen and felt as we've all holidayed largely here. And it's been, I'd say in 9 years, the most peaceful summer, even though we have got our disruptions and the problems that we are aware of here, that we have a plan around. But in terms of being a mayor on call, it's the quietest summer that I've had in 9 years. So while on one hand we know our challenges and they are there, we've responded really well to things over summer, so well done. The issue that is emerging a little bit now is the murky waters, a bit like our recovery after COVID, where we worked with the Chamber of Commerce, MSD, about what support is there for our small businesses who aren't sure in the red zone exactly what their entitlements or their workers' entitlements are. Are you seeing some leadership there from the Chamber, or are you getting inquiries through your area, Andrew?
Through the chair, look, the Chamber's has been doing a really good job in that space, and so we've been working more closely with them to just make sure that we're not duplicating effort. We're all aware that we've got, there's not endless resource, so I know, they've certainly done a lot of work in terms of that 100% vaxxed piece of work, and it's encouraging to see kind of businesses picking that up and running with it. So yeah, I think I certainly haven't had any feedback that there's a lot of questions on that space. We're from time to time kind of getting involved with a business that might be in distress or need some help to kind of think a little bit differently around the position they're in, and we're just offering that on a case-by-case basis. So.
Management plan, if I could add too, just the amazing support that visitors that have poured through my household for the lakefront, Pūtaki o Tawa, the forest, just the delight about what is open in Rotorua. And then the next question is, when is the museum going to open, and when is the Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre going to open? So these are all iconic that people are really looking forward to. Hopefully we get that Shimpak this year, some stage, but we're all aware of supply chain.
Thank you. And Councillor Okawate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, everyone. Look, I don't think we should underestimate the impact that inflation is going to have on the purchasing power of our families. The increase in cost of living, the increase of, doing your shopping, your weekly shopping, petrol, rent, accommodation, all of those things are going to severely impact on what families can do with their dollar, because we know that the dollar that we had, the purchasing power that we had a couple of years ago is not the same now. And so while we do want our businesses to be open, to have good resources and to have what we want to be able to purchase, the fact is that a lot of people now are really having to turn their dollar over a couple of times before they spend it. So that will have an impact. And the inflation rate, like it is in the UK and in the USA, is the same, running at the same rate, highest in 30 years, and it's going to have an impact. So, and that'll probably see us right until the end of this year as well. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Andrew, our Chief Executive from Rotorua Economic Development. We appreciate the update not only on how Rotorua is going, but how we're going as a country too through these challenging times. Thanks. So we will now move to page 13, the financial performance. May I please have a mover and a seconder that the report financial performance for the 6 months ended 31st December 2021 be received. Moved by Councillor Yates, seconded by Mr Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. And we'll invite Thomas Colley to overview his presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors and board members, and welcome back in the new year. Just following on from that previous presentation, the financial result for the 6 months ended 31 December. You will recall back in early December, we had our financial update for the October period, and what we signalled was a year of pressure ahead with regards to pressure in our revenues, particularly around the events and venue space, and cost pressures around supporting QE Health with their development, housing, and in particular the community safety. And what we've seen over the last 2 months is a manifestation of some of those pressures that were indicated. So what we have seen is a deterioration of the financial result over that 2-month period to the one that's in front of you now, where we're lagging about 2.6 million behind budget. Just for clarity's sake, that $1 million grant towards QE is reflected in this result, so the underlying operating result, in light of the challenges that are there, are not ideal, however, are positive considering the challenges in front of us. And the pressure in here is reflective of all those ones that we've talked about in the past. And what you see is when you break down our result into our activities areas between our groups of activities, you will see that the pressure is really clustered into the 2 areas: the community wellbeing, which is the area that obviously reflects the community safety initiatives, and there's district development and regulatory, which is a reflection of the housing challenges and the investment going into plan changes and supporting the housing, with all the other activities pretty much close to on budget or slightly maybe over budget, but just due to timing. I'll just remind you as well is that while that operating result for the year to date shows as a deficit, we haven't included capital revenues in particular for roading, so when they come in we are generating an overall surplus to help fund our underlying renewal program. So revenues themselves, so you'll see that probably at the start of the year we're tracking close to budget, and then there's probably no surprise with the August lockdown and then the red light setting to orange and now back to red again, that revenue started to lag behind budget. In particular, the majority of that is in the events and venue space, and we just need to do a little bit more work with that team now in light of the recent red light changes that occurred the other week with regards to now what that looks like and what actions can be taken to minimise the impact of that over the remainder of the year. From an expense point of view, again, tracking fairly close to budget for the most of the year, and what we have seen is just an acceleration of investment into the housing component, and particularly Three Waters reform and the housing strategy. And what you are obviously now seeing is you are seeing a number of large subdivisions getting approved and developers moving ahead, so you are now seeing results with regards to that investment that has been made, and there is still significant more investment to be made in that space over the coming 6 months as well, and longer. So this is what I did show you back in December with regards to probably a worst case scenario with regards to where we were looking for the end of the year and the pressures that we are facing, and we obviously continue to face. And so what we've done since then is we've started an internal project with regards to our finance business partners, meeting with all the managers, and we are reviewing our operating expenditure. There is a view that targeting savings that will have minimal impact on levels of services, so we will look at initiatives where we can pull back and there won't be a noticeable change with regards to our service delivery. However, what we have agreed is that the priority needs to remain with our housing initiatives to ensure that as much effort as possible continues into that front to free up more land for future development and housing, and in particular the community safety as well. With regards to the challenges that we have there, that investment needs to continue as well. We are confident at this stage, not knowing what the future has ahead of us, that we expect to bring the operating result within 2% of budget, so that's in the $1.5 to $2 million range. And we should be able to update you on that next month with regards to how we are progressing on that. I'll just iterate that while that operating result will be a deficit, we do not plan to use borrowings to fund our operations, and so savings obviously will also be made with regards to some of our capital expenditure to ensure we fit within the funding envelope we've been provided. On the capital spend front, it's progressing well. There are a number of projects that are well underway and spend continues. My apologies, that graph is a little bit hard to see now that I see it up on the large screen. But the majority of the spend to date has been in the Performing Arts Centre and the lakefront, and the Performing Arts Centre is on track, I think, to be opened in October, all going well. And the lakefront is obviously progressing well. You've all seen the fruits of that latest stage with regards to the playground, and there's further work with regards to the next stage about to be commenced as well. Underneath of all that, the renewal program is also progressing well. However, we did signal before that we do anticipate to be underspent. The capital works program for this year is about $150 million. It's probably the biggest we've ever had, with last year being our second biggest year. And as signalled before, that these 4 projects will likely lead to a timing with regards to underspent on these projects, and will transition into next year. The only one I will say is the Aquatic Centre, is my understanding from yesterday that we expect to go out for tender in a couple of weeks' time. And then hopefully therefore that once those tenders come back, then that project will kick off into full swing. And for those people that love water slides and all those sorts of things, I understand that there's been some good agreement with regards to third-party funding and contribution towards water slides and all those other cool ancillary features to the facility. So all going well, that community asset will be well under development, and will be looking good in a year or so's time. So with regards to the year-end forecast, we expect the operating result to be within $2 million of budget. We expect our capital works program to be down by about $50 million. Now that'll obviously be reflected in our borrowing as well. That'll obviously be whatever we are down there. We expect the borrowings we plan to be down by the same amount, and we are not anticipating to use debt to fund any operating expenditure. So with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Any questions? Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Thomas. Thank you for your report. Thomas, I see there is a significant, from what was projected in the community well-being, from what we were supposed to be to, is that made any significant changes, improvements?
So that's the community safety aspect of it. So that's probably a reflection of the improved community patrols that you're seeing, and I guess the public will be the ones to judge as to how successful that has been, but I understand that it has been warmly accepted with regards to the increased presence and the safety that people have felt. It's also, an additional, there is a significant investment into increasing our CCTV capability, so part of that reflects that element as well.
Councillor Bentley, followed by Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for your report. With regard to this, alluding to the fact that some outside funding has come in for water slides and so forth, who was that from? Are we allowed to know?
That will be with the partner that we operate the aquatic centre with, who have a history of doing these at other aquatic centres throughout New Zealand, whereby they provide those additional facilities at their cost.
Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thomas, page 15, just talking about the museum and additional ground testing underway over December. What do we still not understand is, have we finally nutted out what we're building on down there, and were there any shocks out of that? Do we know? I know you said, you know, on that presentation we're moving into detailed design, but have we finished all of the, I guess, the understanding of what we're dealing with yet?
Incredibly close. I would anticipate an update in the next month or two with regards to what this next stage looks like. Yeah.
We'll go to Councillor Kaifong and then Mr. Waru.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Morning, Thomas. Just two questions, if I could, Madam Chair. One is just around the QE grant. I know it was to be debt funded, so why do we put that in the operational expenses part of the budget?
Because it is a grant, it has to be treated as expenditure and is reflected in our operating result from an accounting principle perspective. Yep. Okay.
Thank you, that explains that. And just a quick question just around the Three Waters reform, which says that we are going to offset the consultancy spend, but just a question about where we're heading ourselves with the approach to the Three Waters reform, because we really haven't had any update as councillors as to what the process is and where we're at with the Three Waters reform.
I might just get Stavros to answer that when we get him up for his part of the operational report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te tiamana. Kia ora, Thomas. Easy question. So 50 mil underspent, which is not moaning about that at all, but and I know it's due to timing, so that's the certain projects have been deferred or to the next financial year. Is that what you're... Couple, just making sure. Kia ora, tēnā koe.
Cool. Just quickly, Madam Chair, the Three Waters reform has gone a bit quiet. I think the government has some other challenges. We were anticipating release of... they were providing transitional funding, and they were going to give criteria to everyone with regards to how to apply for that. So obviously I was eager to apply to get more funding, but that hasn't been released either. So just helping my colleague out, it's just gone a bit quiet on that front, and just kind of watching where that, what happens next, and that really is in the government's hand with regards to when they wish to move on that.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Thomas. The question I have is on page 15. Before asking the question, it's on Read the Lakefront. Look, a big bouquet, big hats off for having the lakefront ready in time for Christmas and New Year, especially the kids' playground. I made sure my mokos enjoyed it down there more than they did at the hurdy-gurdies. So I think all the timing too was excellent. Even the toilets, having that all ready. The question I have is, there are still a couple of other different stages, because some of the folk in Ohinamatu are just wanting to know when certain things are going to happen, because at the moment with, they're not panicking, but Omicron building up and everything, they just see people wandering through into their area. So I'm just saying, is everything on track down there at the moment?
Yes, and I think there's an item later in confidential which will provide a little more clarity on when the next step looks like, but it is progressing well, and the team in particular did a great job with regards to the timing to make sure that that playground and everything was opened right on time for the busy Christmas period.
Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any further questions? There appear to be... Oh, yes, sorry, Mr. Waru.
Sorry, Thomas. Kia ora, e te tiamana. Just a quick question came into my mind now. So just in regards to the museum spend, can you refresh my memory, please? So how much was the grant that we received, if I remember correctly, and how much have we spent so far on it? If you can answer that.
I can't remember the exact splits of the grants. My apologies, but they were substantial. My understanding over the years, including deconstruction, stripping the inside, making right of certain things, strengthening the design work to date, the engineering, I believe the spend to date is about $4 million. So it is obviously a substantial investment, but I'd have to, when the next museum update, I'm sure we can provide you the split of those revenues, but it was substantial. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Rokawate.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Thomas. Thomas, in the key revenue areas that we're down, in terms of parking, lease income, rental income, and also the venue hire, I presume, are you anticipating that this will be the case for the next 12 months? Probably little in the way of change there. Would that be right?
It would be a safer assumption at the moment. I think the surprise to us was probably the red setting that came just over a week and a half ago, and the impact that had on the events and venue space. So there were a large number of significant events that were booked that have now cancelled or postponed, when postponing will probably mean as well. So we just need to get an understanding now of when that likelihood will change, and so more work to do in that space, but it is likely that those conditions will extend for the remainder of this calendar year.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Yes, Madam Chair, if I could just share with you that there was a conference to be held, a significant conference to be held in Rotorua in May, but that has, and I'm involved in that, and it's been postponed until September. And I thought, well, why? May's a few months off yet, but it's just the uncertainty. And when we went into red, the decision was actually made by the organisers. So there's no doubt about it that red has had a significant impact. And for some months out, they're cancelling those events, which I thought they might have been able to be held, but it doesn't seem to be the case. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Rokawate. Your Worship, the Mayor.
To add on that I opened the first conference yesterday that we've had this year, and it was in the red zone, but they had to reduce their numbers down to 78 and managed, but they were all representative of big organisations. They were so excited at the centre, at the Energy Event Centre, said there are several postponements, they're not cancellations, and they're just literally waiting for what's going to happen in the marketplace about the zoning.
Thank you. And yes, we certainly are starting to see the impacts of the red and COVID, and I know we were anticipating it, but it is concerning also to know that we do anticipate further impact of fees and charges as we navigate these unprecedented times, as you've mentioned in your report, Thomas. So thank you very much to you and the team who are managing to continue to deliver an excellent service to the community under such strict financial pressures. So we certainly appreciate that, and I'm sure that the ratepayers would also appreciate hearing that we're going through line by line, ensuring that we can do the best we can with the money available in these challenging times, so thank you. We now move to our operational reports. So this is for the time period of October to December. Can I please have a mover and a seconder that the operational report for October to December 2021 be received? Moved by Ms Rothwell, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. And our first one up is Thomas. Sorry. Welcome back, Thomas. Long time no see. So this is our DCE for the Organisational Enablement Group, and on our agenda we are between page 16 and page 18.
I'll take the report as read and happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Thomas. Any questions, Your Worship?
It's just a statement, really. I know I should ask a question, but great response about the investment on what's happening on the state highways. And the public have certainly noticed that summer was a much easier way of navigating through. So thanks to Stavros and his team, yourself, and look forward to the next stage to get underway. But that's been what was a huge disruptor, something that now is flowing so smoothly. So well done.
Thank you.
There appear to be no other questions. Thank you, Thomas. Would now invite our DCE for Infrastructure and Environment Solutions Group, Stavros, to overview his operational report. We are between page 18 and page 28 of our agenda. Welcome, Stavros.
Morena, through you, Madam Chair. Our operations report obviously is an outline of a whole range of activities related to our business plan for the given periods. And I'll take the report as read, and I'll be more than happy to respond to any questions that may arise out of these activities. I would like, though, to note 2 or 3 key points here, that those activities have some specific purpose, and they're broken down into about 3 distinct areas at this point in time. The first priority is for us to navigate through a whole range of activities that ensure the safe, reliable and stable provision of services for the periods. And I'm pleased to report that throughout the period, all our activities have achieved their KPIs. Our proactive and reactive maintenance and renewal programs ensure that our drinking water standards have continued to be met. We have a significant New Zealand Transport Agency, a Waka Kotahi audit about the $26 million of funding assistance we received from them over the NLTP, and we have passed that audit system, which means that we're meeting all our technical, operational and procurement requirements. Our wastewater management systems have met all their KPIs. In fact, we are well under our agreed by the Council targeted KPIs of 10 faults per 1,000 connections. We are way under 50% of that at this point in time, and we plan to continue in that direction. We are also able to report that our operations and maintenance ensure that we did not have any adverse environmental effects that could not have been managed. The second element of all our work programs relate to 2 other key areas. It's our overall effort to ensure that we provide an enabling capacity for our housing and our community wellbeing programs. You see in the report, and over the next few weeks, you'll be in receipt of additional reports regarding that preparation for that capability and capacity development. We continue to provide the necessary technical inputs into the finalization of the technical design for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant, without which we cannot consent any new housing developments, and we expect that detailed design work to reach you over the next few months so we can commence the upgrade of the treatment plant. We have continued to deliver our various water renewals and stormwater renewal programs that connect potential development sites to our management systems, so we are able to consent additional housing projects. We have concluded and are progressing consenting approaches with our partners, especially Mana Whenua, with regards to the securing of water supplies, and over the period we have secured our joint resource consent with the Taniwha Springs, and now we are in the process of finalizing the technical cultural reports to progress into the technical reconstruction of the puna in that area. And again, that would give us further assurance that we have continuity of water supply for the Nongotaha and for emergency purposes to augment the Kutu area, but also will give us an ability to liaise and relate directly with the Hapu with regards to the future management of water supplies from Hamurana Springs. So all these sort of things are building blocks of building our capabilities. And again, as my colleague Thomas, the CFO, reported earlier, we are pleased to know that despite all the pressure markets, the pressure points in the market about the construction sector, which, when you analyze the CPI, runs at least 6% per annum at this point in time, the delivery of our maintenance, renewals, and construction programs are still within 0.1% of our budgets, for the financial year. And we'll continue to make every effort to stay inside those, parameters. The final element of our activities over the last couple of months has been in an effort to address the impacts and effects on our community of the COVID-19 and of course in compliance with the government's directions. And again, that is broken down into two significant components. One is the work of our Civil Defence Emergency Operations Centre does in working with partners like the Te Reo MSD, the Ministry of Health, various NGOs, to ensure that families who need to be isolated because they've been affected by the virus, they have access to ongoing support for the provision of welfare support, groceries, transportation, facilities, and so on. And our EOC team, especially our welfare team, is working closely with a whole range of partners, and we have actually got the financial support from the MSD to the value of about $250,000 to manage and coordinate the provision of support services to all those affected families. The second tranche and the second element of our civil defense and I suppose our crisis management activities relates to this organization's business continuity plan. We do hear and we anticipate and do witness from international evidence that the emergence of the Omicron virus will most likely have an impact onto the availability of our staff to provide our core services or critical services. We hear from the experts that we can expect at any given time up to 25 or 30% of our resources not to be available for work because they will need to be isolated. So over the last few weeks, we have embarked into a process to review our business continuity plans and ask some simple questions. If that eventuates, what are the critical services that have to be done versus the critical services that need to be deferred? So I'm pleased to report to you that the organization is got at the moment in progress, and we will soon finalize a comprehensive business continuity plan framework of which we can ensure and assure you and assure our communities that if we get impacted by the emergence of the Omicron variant, then we, together with our service provider partners, have plans in place to ensure that lifeline and critical services will continue to be maintained. Our service suppliers have been assuring us, and we have seen their plans, that they started operating on split shifts. They separate their operations. They ensure that they have ability to operate on 24/7. So our wastewater systems, our waste collections, our drinking water, our responses to safety issues on our networks will be adequately and appropriately addressed. So for that period, a lot of that work has gone behind the scenes, under the radar, and I think it's pleasing to know, and I can report to you that none of our critical services has suffered any disruptions, or at least at an acceptable level. And our focus and energies from now on is to ensure that this continues to be the case under any circumstances. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Kia ora, Stavros. Thanks for the presentation, and what a great milestone the Tanewha Springs joint consent was. And a bit along the lines of the pending question from Councillor Kaifong about Three Waters reform. I think that is a clear indicator of how they needed to pause and rethink the governance of those entities for the Three Waters. But I'm sort of in I guess, a more informed position, along with Mr. Thomas being on the project steering group for water supplies. Just how we can't wait for Three Waters reform. I just wonder a comment from you regarding the consents we have in the pipeline and the consents that are coming up in the stormwater and potable water space to enable our housing growth, how important they are.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. To be frank, there is a lot of speculations, a lot of ongoing questioning by the community, and to many, to some degree, I think some people make assumptions of what the final outcome would be. I think what we know officially at this point in time is that the government and the minister have signalled very clearly that they intend to promote a water services bill by June this calendar year. That bill will clearly articulate what they intend to do, what the setup of the entities will be, what the governance structure is going to be, and then once that's taken place, obviously there will be a significant time frame and energy and effort put into converting a concept into a working model. It will take, in my professional opinion, years to get to that level. Maybe in 2-3 years' time we'll have the governance structure, might have the management structure, but actually the operational and working model, including information systems, funding and revenue strategies, levying rates, borrowing decisions, and so on, will take a lot of time to materialize. Concurrent with that statement of the government's intention, probably some of you would know that the DIA has actually created what they call a transition unit. So it may sound a little bit oxymoronic sometimes, like that the bill has yet to be enacted and has been agreed by the Parliament, but the Ministry is actually progressing with the transition unit as if though the bill is secured and progressed. So we are collaborating with them. We provide information about staffing levels, about the future capacity, our needs, and so on, and that's fine. We'll continue to work in that kind of direction. But all the advice we have from the Minister and from the Department of Internal Affairs is quite simple. Continue to operate and make prudent long-term decisions for your councils as if though nothing is happening. Because nothing we can make, no decisions we can make in the Three Waters area are decisions that are of short-term effects. Whatever decisions we make now about consenting, relationships, capability, capacity, quality building, stability of the networks and so on, they've got a horizon of 50 to 100 years. And whether these entities will take over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 years, it's basically irrelevant to the long-term impact of that. What is relevant is how this council, and in due time, will have an opportunity to review the governance model and our participation. I think we need to pay our attention as to how we can have a meaningful and pragmatic impact in input into these decision-making processes, rather than that the decision as to when the Three Waters take place, who is going to own the assets, who is going to charge for it, and so on. The answer is that I don't know that yet. And I said, I would not be amiss to say the government itself doesn't know yet. The bill has not been agreed, has not been voted in. The necessary transition processes have not been mapped. The future strategies have not been identified and consummated. So I think we continue to operate in a prudent fashion, appropriate with the long-term life nature of the assets and the services we are in charge of. So that's my advice to you, and I think that continue to be advised until I'm informed otherwise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. On the Three Waters, we'll go back to Councillor Kai Fong. We'll tune into you, Councillor, for your question that you had earlier.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's been a bit difficult to hear on Zoom. It actually sounds like everyone's in a fishbowl or something. So, Stavros, sorry, it's been a bit hard to hear your response, but I was really, I think that you've answered where the government's at, but it's just from a council perspective, ourselves the opportunity to discuss the different models and what our response will be. So will we be having some sort of workshop or further discussion later on around the Three Waters reform?
Councillor Kai Fong, sorry, apologies for the sound effects. I'm not entirely sure how it comes to you. Look, the information I have from our national steering groups and so on is that once the bill has been progressed and we know for sure what the proposal of the bill and the various systems will be, I think it would be stands to reason that we as an executive team will have to have workshop and a forum with elected members to fully outline the details and develop a submission, position for that bill, and develop any appropriate responses to that. At this point in time, we're waiting for the bill to be promoted, through the appropriate channels of governance. I can tell you one thing which I think sounds positive, and I'm saying that from the perspective of my professional connections with various people, is that the voices of TLAs regarding the initial governance approach, to the Three Waters have been heard very clearly. Yeah. It's significant that certain staff in the Department of Internal Affairs who were in favour of a particular centralised model have left the Department of Internal Affairs. And in my opinion, have left that for a particular reason. Yeah. So I'm taking comfort that the governance arrangements and the governance concerns and the inputs requirements from TLAs have been heard loud and clear by the Minister, but I would not know that until we actually get the details of the bill promoted through the Parliament. I hope that's sufficient for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavros. We've got Councillor Yates, followed by Mr Waru, then who worshipped the Mayor, and Councillor Kumar.
Ka whai through you, Madam Chair, nei rā te mihi ki a koe, Stavros. I have two kaupapa. The first is on page 27, and it's around 5.6.3 recycling, and the acknowledgement that bin contamination still remains a challenge. So what's the solution around ensuring that, and whether or not further advertising in whatever media outlets or in-school education or community group organisations could be an option to getting more communication and education around how to appropriately discard your rubbish.
Thank you, Councillor Yates. You are quite right. It's disheartening, and again, I can assure you are not unique in that. Our colleagues across the country are facing similar problems with it. So we, as part of our repositioning of our structures over the last few months, we have created for ourselves a little bit of a what we call an environmental group. And one of the main tasks of that is to continue to work in terms of education, and in terms of enforcement, and in terms of alternative ways of managing waste, in order to make maximum use and effectiveness of the resources dedicated to that. And as you're aware, we continue these kind of programs. I wish I could give you a magic sort of bullet solution to that. I think there has to be a balance between education and enforcement. And the flip point of that is sometimes it's very difficult to navigate. You can go on the harsh side and say, would not collect your recyclables. You can go too much on the soft side and people could continue to use the recycling bin as a dumping ground. So we're trying to find the sweet spot in there too, but we continue these efforts.
Just my second one is around oxygenated water throughout Mangakahi, Koutu and Kaua Point. We've been experiencing that over the last couple of months. Is that a natural occurrence? Are you aware of that?
Yes, I am aware of it. I would like to make a very clear point here, because I often get from the community calls related to the warnings from the health officer about algae blooms, and obviously that manifests itself into what we call the trophic levels of the water. There is unfortunately a perception within the community that every time such a warning is given out, the major culprits, it's sewage spills into the lakes. As a matter of fact, one of my iwi colleagues from Te Reo noted to me that, rightly or wrongly, a large portion of our community thinks that Lake Rotorua it's overlain with human wastewater. The answer is not. A lot of these incidents of algae blooms and lack of oxygen into lakes relates to excessive nutrients flowing into the lake, warm weather. In recent examples too, we have done a significant what we call E. coli tracing exercise, where we have taken water from various sources that fill into the Lake Rotorua, and we've traced E. coli through genetic tracing and mapping. And I can assure you, and I can assure our community, that any E. coli into Lake Rotorua does not come from human wastewater. It comes from animal and birds. And we continue to work with our partners in the Bay of Plenty Regional Council to ensure that there are various regulatory policies pertaining to the Plan Change 10, land incentives programs, the monitoring their consents for land use actually manifest an effectiveness in reducing these sources of contamination and pollution into our receiving waters.
Thank you, Stavros. This was with regards to tap water.
Are you talking about drinking water now? Okay, and now, drinking water, we are fully aware of that, and there is, again, there is also a concern that there is a lead leaking into from pipe fittings. The Ministry of Health are working on 2 areas at the moment to review and define the safe levels of lead into the water, but also what is emerging too is the safe levels of nutrients into water. So what can I give you assurance at the moment is that we have a high degree of certainty that any lead contamination on drinking water does not arise from a public network system. It arises from fittings into each individual house. And again, it's one of the sort of side effects of, for the last 30 years, where we have imported a lot of fittings that came from areas where the standards of lead components have not always been scrupulously monitored. So we can see that, but our standard advice remains, if you're going to use a tap for water drinking, let it run for a few seconds, and then use the water. Our water is safe, and our water will continue to be safe. We're meeting all our drinking water standards. Then look into your own individual household issues, and then we can assist you with that whenever we can.
Thank you very much, Stavros. I think it is important that the community know that information, and of course that we are fully compliant with the drinking water standards for New Zealand, and also as a water supplier under the Health Act, Council is fully compliant. Thank you very much. We go to Mr. Waru, followed by Her Worship the Mayor, Councillor Kumar, then Councillor Maxwell.
Tēnā no koe te chairmana. Kia ora, Stavros. Pai tiki te atu ia koe. Councillor Yates took a few on my pātai, so, but I still got a few. Now, around the water again, probably not so much of a scientific thing, I just want your opinion about it. Over the years, And we've had a few hui about these things around, Tākina Karamu, Te Awahau, Taniwha Springs Rā, and a few other places where our local hapu iwi have noticed the levels of the awa and everything just going down, and they continue to go down. Just wanted your kōrero around, have we reached a point in terms of supplying our people here in this community with good quality drinking water? Have we reached a point where that's it, or are there other plans ahead to sort of address that? Because, kai te kōrero mo te Māori, you just keep taking and taking and taking. Eventually, it all catches up on us. So just wanted your feeling around that, Stavros. Kia ora.
Chiara, we have 10 water sources, and most of, all of them come from springs. It's quite important to know that all the water we take for drinking water purposes, for supplying our community, it's regulated by maximum take by various consents. We have not breached those consents, at any given level. I'm fully aware, obviously, that the regional councils and the regional policy statement is progressing a new plan change 9, which will make the ongoing consenting for taking water for drinking purposes a bit more challenging, because it needs to address what we call the kaitiaki flow of the residual streams. I do, however, wanted to note too that a lot of the fluctuations of flows into the streams does not necessarily relate to the amount of water we take from the springs for drinking purposes. It relates to the ephemeral weather patterns. We have here, we have too much rain, too much little rain, and so on. Most of the spring water that we use got a life cycle of 50 to 60 years. So really the water we take today is a result of rainfall that fell 60 years ago. So that kind of flow-on effect is not readily connected. Now, the second part of your question is that how we reach the amounts, the total quantity of water we need for the community, and you say enough is enough. Well, I think that'd be two matters. Obviously, we aspire to grow our community, and my colleagues and myself are working towards enabling up to 10,000 new houses, and that would generate more demand. Now, having that in mind, obviously, for every new resource consent we secure for water supplies, a whole range of considerations and cultural impact assessment taken into account. On the other side of that, this council, whether it could be my time or any future officer sitting in this position here too, has to consider some key questions. Are we short of water in Rotorua? And the answer is no. We might be wanting to preserve the water we take from springs, but if you take combinedly at least 3 lakes around here, Rotorua, Koreka, and Lake Tarawera, we've got about 2.5 billion cubic meters of water in there available to us, enough to supply our needs for the next 250 years without any rain. So the question is that, can we use that water, the surface water, in a better way and more consistent way with cultural impact assessments and in a cost-effective manner by treating surface water instead of using spring waters? These are decisions that we do consider, will continue to consider, because there is always going to be a cost-benefit analysis, including cultural effects, and we'll report back to you and the relevant governance bodies, and we'll make some decisions in the future too. So I think we are always considering these issues, and I think the resource concerns of the regulatory framework will drive us in that kind of direction anyway. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Sort of the partai, well, it is my partai, but it's come from not just out of the nowhere. A lot of people are concerned. I suppose, just want to know, have some assurance around, there's a lot of growth planned for this place, and those who live around those particular puna and stuff like that do see it and have seen it. And I know Uncle Trevor's seen it from when he was a knee-high to a grasshopper, a couple of years ago. And tai no mai ki e nei rā, they do see these things, and it's more for, I just wanted you to put the kōrero out there, so this sort of keeps that, yes, pai te wai e nui te wai, kai te wora pai te wai. So, but still good to know that we're looking at how we can better utilise the surface water as well. Bueno, tērā, pātai tuarua was around the refuse. As I said, Councillor Yates sort of took my thunder out from that one, but I just want to know, I remember some time ago there was a presentation here around how we could better utilise and perhaps commercialise in some way was it biodegradable stuff? I think it was food wastes. But I haven't heard or anything like that, any progress on that, or is that still in the works? Kia ora.
Thank you. With regards to food and organic green waste, just to refresh your memory, Council's waste management strategy and LTP signal that the Council will progress to consult with the community about these processes over the next few months. The intention is to progress that consultation and offer options for diversion of food waste and green waste from each individual property, and we expect to have that done before the end of this calendar, so in this financial year, or halfway through this calendar year, June, with a view of decisions to be made so can be implemented in the next financial year and commencing any potential services in the following year.
Thank you, Stavros. I look forward to that. Kia ora.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Just a couple of comments, then a question. I'd love to see our children become the recycling monitors at home. They're the ones that tell me off about what goes into what, and we might be able to do that through the schools, but that's just education and the Enviro Schools project. That's a comment, but they know best, actually, and we get it wrong still. I do. The other one for us is a congratulations on yourself and Ian Stabler turning up to the Tarawera sewage AGM. That was incredibly well received, that staff went in the first week of January, and Deputy Dave and I were there. So that is going, and our community board member, Phil, that's going very positively with the community, and thank you for that relationship, because that's where relationships matter to get things done. But the one thing I am questioning about, and I couldn't get it myself, was the concern of Hapu about the work done on the Nongataha stream, which I was thrilled to see, and then I heard Hapu saying it's the wrong time of year to do any work, whereas I'm getting criticism that I'm not seeing any work being done. So had we involved that marae at all about projected works that were going to be done? Because I thought it was positive, and then we got hit again in the media that what are you doing making our streams muddy for our kids in summer that want to jump off the bridge, because we've got other ratepayers saying that's incredibly dangerous. What are you doing about it? So it was that sort of stuff we got a bit conflicted in over summer. Can you just tell us how that working party is proceeding?
Can I make, thank you, Your Worship, can I make some
yes
important distinction here too, is that there are two different parts to your question. One is that the Nongataha reference group recommended actions following the 2018 flooding process. As elected members would know, there is a reference group, community reference group, the whole range of whole number of community meetings and actions have been taken, and that include basically two broad approaches to that. Is it's an ongoing maintenance of the stream all the way from the State Highway 36 all the way up to Paradise Valley, and that regional council undertakes as maintenance work. They remove trees, they correct embankments, they remove obstacles in the flow of water. And the second element is engineering interventions to improve the capacity of the channel between, the stream channel between State Highway 5 and State Highway 36. Now, the engineering options have been reduced from about 23 to about 3. It's been agreed by the communities, but the regional council and of course us, we work together with them. We're involved with relevant landowners to make sure that we have an agreement as to use their land. For example, the AMP grounds, need to be modified to allow a secondary flow path, for the stream, because the channel cannot accommodate flows for the projected, demand in the future. Now, the issue we've seen in the media recently, I'm not entirely sure, but to the best of my knowledge, it's work the regional council has been doing or allowed to happen in the embankments of the stream to ensure that the stream capacity is maintained. It's just the ongoing maintenance. Remember, we have faced we and the regional council have faced a significant level of concern by the community after the flooding that was a result of poor maintenance. So the regional council is doing that maintenance at the moment. But also their maintenance program needs to be aligned with other considerations like fishing and game, the time of migration of the fish, and so on. And I'm not entirely sure about that debate about the relevant timing. And to be perfectly honest and frank, I'm a little bit ignorant about the life habits of the fish in the stream. But I trust that my colleagues in the regional council are far more aware about those kind of constraints, and I will doubt it very much that the regional council will have embarked or have allowed work to take place into the stream without talking to the relevant affected parties. But that's the best of my knowledge as far as I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Stavros. Just a couple of questions. One is if there is a review of the cycling green corridors in the city. The other question is with regards to what we've got on page 19 regarding roading minor improvements, and there's a consultation that's out at the moment on Otonga Road, a road coming project. This letter was dated 27th of January, received by the residents mainly on the 1st and the 2nd. Of that, there was one public holiday on Monday, and then there's another public holiday this Monday. So given the time frame that it needs to be by the council, and it says your comments to the attention of infrastructure capital, but in writing. So within the time frame, but they does not give any communication that they could send an email through. I believe there could be a very short time frame for people to communicate on this matter, because there is a lot of concern regarding that. And the other thing that I've catch over here is that the Lake Council is planning and proceeding with the road coming project, and any feedback is welcome. But while we look at this, and we see also that the extension to it goes into Nickhouse Street as well, part of calming those traffic is then allowing a lot of traffic to sort of race through Springfield Road. Has that been looked at? Because the Springfield Road residents have been crying out for quite some time as well. That's one issue. And while we are on road calming, is Mamaku looked at as well in the long-term plan for road calming? Because they have some serious boy racer problems there.
I'll let Stavros answer any parts that he thinks may be relevant, but sure. there is a lot of detailed questions in there that we can very easily get that information for you if you email staff, but confirm that in writing would have meant just formally, which is either through letter or email is perfectly fine, but obviously you can't pick up the phone or go on Facebook, and that won't qualify as a submission.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quite correct. I think confirming writing, it's any form of writing, email is acceptable. I think the core intention here is that we have identified some safety issues on that part of Otonga Road. We propose some interventions. We're seeking the residents' comments about it. Now, I can assure you that we will not be that strict in terms of time frames. If we receive further feedback, we'll respond to that. Mamaku, yes, we are working with the community and chair of the Lakes Royal Community Board. Is fully aware of that. There is a significant amount of expenditure to be done in Mamaku, for safety improvements, road safety improvements will take place. I want to address one simple point, if I could. You've noted that traffic is racing through Springfield roads. I did have some communications recently with some people, and actually the evidence does not support it. I think the average speeds over there is well under the speed limits. The traffic flows are within the hierarchy of the roads, and I think I have seen no data or no evidence to indicate that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, the reason I said one of Springfield Road in particular as well, because when you lock in Otonga Road and Nikau Street, so if they do not want to come through Nikau and Otonga, they're going to use Springfield Road more extensively to get into Old Taupo.
That would be a good thing because Springfield is a collector road.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, followed by Councillor O'Cowatate, Councillor Wang, and then we'll move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Hope you had a good holiday break. First of all, before going to my question, I want to thank the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Waru for raising the positive things about Taniwha Springs. We over the summer, a lot of our whānau out there in the mokos and that are swimming, and there are a lot of fish swimming up the river coming out of the hot lake. I noticed that, and it is unique in New Zealand. The one I had was touched on briefly earlier, but I heard the worship say Nongata, River Nongata. The one I wanted to ask about was Waititi, next door to us. Is it the same one? Is it? Okay, Waititi, Kaumatua from Ngāra Nui Kai Ngātai raised it. And to me, is that it's Bay of Plenty Regional Council's issue, isn't it? It's not ours. We should sue them. They sued us over the Waka River.
Thank you for your opinion, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor O'Cowatate, followed by Councillor Wang.
Yes, thank you. It's in relation, Stavros Morena, in relation to Taniwha Springs. And I do recall that when we went and had a look at a number of the springs, the iwi were quite, or the mana whenua were quite concerned about the contraption that was built over one of them. And I'm just see where we've got a design detail that's underway now for the new pump station. And I just wondered if it could, in some way, not necessarily the design, but possibly the mural or something on it, reflect the importance of the spring to mana whenua. And I think that would be, I'm not sure if that's been canvassed, but I think it would be really nice to see that.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Yes, absolutely. Next week in the SPNF, you will receive a report commissioning Ngāti Rangi Waihe to undertake for important cultural elements of that restoration. And of course, one of them is how the puna will look in terms of Ngāti Rangi Waihe, cultural expectations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros. Firstly, I'd just like to pass on the thanks from the Rural Community Board with the refuse collection rollout in Ngākuru Horohoro and Upper Atiamuri. It's been really appreciated. I would also like to thank the council officers with working with the secondary school students actually, and Mainoki in the night markets, and they've been helping educate the attendees of the night market on food waste collection and in preparation for what will be coming ahead. A few questions from me. The first one was around the landfill and around the legacy tyres at the landfill and the planning for the opportunities to recycle the tyres. Would that also include an opportunity to look into a recycling service for tyres instead of for them to just end up in the landfill, but to have them a potential opportunity to have them recycled at our facility, collection at our facility?
Yes. Councillor Wong, the answer is yes. There is actually the Ministry of the Environment, a direction, to take away stockpiles of tyres, to recycling centre. By necessity, the whole country cannot afford to have recycling centres in each individual district, and there will be one or two areas, in the whole country. Waste management actually themselves have been commissioned a significant investment in tyre recycling. So I think the answer is yes, the tyres will be recycled. The second element is that tyres will not be able to recycle locally. They will have to be taken into a nationally, probably one facility for the whole of North Island, and making arrangements to that effect. So have a continuous, diversion of tyres into for recycling facility.
And also like to thank you on just before with Councillor Kumar mentioning the traffic issues, and I can assure you that the Rural Community Board, we've had it raised to us, especially in the rural areas, but specifically in Mamaku, but just to put out a general reminder to take down some evidence, like number plates, things like that, so that they can be passed on to the police. But the next question that I had was just around the wastewater, and I see that Trinity has installed the monitoring stations in the network, because I remember that sometime last year we had the mass die-off in the bacteria at the wastewater treatment plant. Would this potentially stop that from happening in the future?
Again, without going to a huge detail, the answer is yes. The toxic shock in the treatment plant late last year, middle of last year, happened because of, at this point in time, unconfirmed source trade waste. Someone dumped a whole lot of toxic waste into wastewater and killed all our bacteria. So what really they are doing, because they are responsible under the contract for complying with the resource concerns and the quality of the wastewater treatments, they're proactively installing what we call early warning systems in an effort to try and preemptively identify potential sources of toxic input into the wastewater system before it arrives at the treatment plant. Now, I think the jury is a little bit out at this point in time. Nevertheless, one of the advantages of the contract is just actually gives them that responsibility, and they're applying their knowledge and skills and technical abilities to minimize that the risk they're facing.
Thank you. And the last question, just relating to this as well, does that mean that we also the good chance to have a re-education or just a reminder to the industrial business community around proper process and disposal?
We are still responsible for the trade waste consents we issue, and part of that responsibility means we have to monitor it, and we have to educate and have to enforce. And otherwise, we will not meeting our contractual requirements with Trinity, so we have to do it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Stavros, and especially thank you for ensuring that as our community challenges with it, continues to meet the challenges of COVID, that we can be confident in the business continuity of our critical services. And also, please, a special thank you to our civil defence team here in Council who have been supporting the welfare response for any positive COVID-19 cases, and also any households that are self-isolating. Once again, going above and beyond to ensure the welfare of our community. So please pass our thanks on to them. Stavros, thank you.
Thank you.
We now move to page 28 to Una, our DCE for District Leadership and Democracy Group.
Good morning, members. Lovely to see you back for the beginning of a new year, of which is going to be a very busy year. And before we get into the beginnings of the year, I just want to go back and reflect on some decisions that you yourselves as a council had made at the tail end of last year, and provide an update on where those decisions are currently at in terms of their overall process. The tail end of last year, you made a decision around a representation model to be in force and used for the 2022 and 2025 elections. That process, the decision was made on the 19th of November around a model, and that model was then released, and the calling for appeals and objections to that model. That closed just before Christmas, and we received 12 appeals and objections to that final representation proposal. So the process forward from there is that all of those appeals and objections, as well as all of the information from this council, has been sent down to the local Government Commission, who are now reviewing all of that material alongside many other councils who are in the same position as us in terms of their representation review model. We expect to hear soon whether we will in fact have a hearing, and it will be the Local Governments Commission decision as to one of those is held. In parallel to this process, you made the decision to support and move forward with a local bill around a step out of the representation review to put forward the model or a model that you felt best represented Rotorua. That local bill, with your support, has been presented to the Parliamentary Council Office, who have been working and providing responses back and forth to our legal team, who are working on that bill to get it to a final form. We were hoping that, and I was hoping that today's session I could tell you that that is in its final form, but there's still some technicalities that both parties are working through. But we are on track and are aiming to notify our intent to formally lodge that local bill, hopefully next week. In saying all of that, our sponsor, Tamati Coffee, is well aware and fully supportive of the local bill, so all things at this stage are all well lined up in order to kick into the next stage around notification, lodgement, reading and hearing that through down at Parliament. So that's the process there. As I said, both of these processes are running in parallel, and either way we will know where we are at in terms of a model for the local elections by April or May. At that point in time, we will have to go into a significant education and awareness campaign for our community so that they understand how they will be able to vote in the upcoming elections. Changing tack just a little bit, so leaving representation model behind, but actually looking at the elections themselves. We're following closely Local Government New Zealand and Solgum, who are collaborating on a national campaign to increase voter turnout and to connect people with candidates. So what are the candidates standing for, and does my vote count towards that candidate? All councils in New Zealand are watching this space at the moment, and I guess there is just a little bit of nervousness within the local governments themselves as to that retaining of the individual or the local identity under a banner of a national campaign. Moving into more of the corporate planning and strategy space, you've heard today Thomas's updates financially on this financial year. Remember, that is year one of the LTP. We need to start turning our minds towards delivery of year two of the long-term plan. There are a series of forums being planned towards the end of February, of which we will start to have a look at with yourselves around what was promised to be delivered in year two and how we will proceed with that. And I think that's me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rena. Were there any questions? Councillor Okawate.
Thank you. Yes, it's in regard to our the bill, and I see here where the Member of Parliament, Tamaji Coffey, is going to present and deliver that. Have we actually looked at also gaining support from the Member of Parliament for Wairiki? Rawiri?
Yes, sorry, we have, and we've had some verbal support from him also.
Oh, that's good. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Una, for the report. Can I ask the local government elections campaign, is it going to be any different from what they've done in the past, where they've tried this to try and get more people to vote in that? Do you know of anything different?
Thank you. That's a good question. I guess that is what we are watching currently at the moment. What we've seen that's been presented really at this stage is more about the collateral rather than the actual approach, which other local governments alongside us are actually sort of a tad concerned with that on. So we're working all closely together as a sector on what the approach needs to be. Collateral can be wonderful and the assets involved with that are invaluable, but it's the actual approach to encouraging people to vote, giving them reasons to vote, making sure that they understand that their vote is meaningful. And I think there needs to be a lot more work done around how does a voter know who the candidate is and what a candidate stands for. And so we're working on that at the moment.
Thank you very much. Rakawatate.
Thank you for allowing me to have another question. Una, will you be having any input into that yourself? I mean, I know I heard you say that I think it's at a national level you're looking at policies, but I'm thinking about, like Rotorua, the opportunity for young people to play a part in determining their future as the civic leader of our city, and also the awareness of cultural and being bicultural but multilingual or bilingual even. So because that's really what I see is required here. Just wonder if you're having any input into developing something along that line.
Yes, we will, and I think that was the challenge that Local Government New Zealand and Solgum have, in terms of they're I guess trying to put forward a national campaign, and you've got other probably smaller councils who really struggle to get messages and things out to their communities. Was that look of, oh wow, are you going to do everything for us, LGNZ and Solgum? But I think we all know that you've got to have that local emphasis for our people on how they vote. And so, yes, we may use some of the guidance and that overall national campaign, but our campaign will be a Rotorua-based election campaign to encourage our people to vote, aligning them with the reasons for why they would vote, and all being based around local issues.
Thank you very much, Una. We now move on to our Te Reo Partnership Group, Jinarangi, and we are on page 29 to 31. Welcome, Gina. Just your mic.
Tēnā tātou I aku rangatira I tēnei wā o te raumati. Tēnā tātou katoa. I'm glad you gave me the page because I'm not currently on it. You'll see from the report which covers October, November, December, that there is a lot of work happening along the ground engaging with mana whenua groups and supporting our teams across council. Two things I wanted to highlight was that we do a lot of work around professional development within council, making sure that our staff have access to tools and have the training that they need in order to do their job well. We unfortunately, due to COVID last year, had to suspend our Noho Marae program So we were really glad that in November we were able to re-establish that Noho Marae program. For the time being, while we're in red, it is being delivered as a day program only, so there is not the marae stay. Many of our Te Arawa marae are currently closed due to the concerns around managing health and safety. So as a further measure to ensure that we can deliver the training but do it in a way that's safe, we were able to hire the marae at Te Puia as an alternative. So it still gave people the experience of a pōhiri, where, as you know, for those of you who have already attended the course, there is really good explanation of what to expect and how to behave. You go through the process of a pōhiri as a guest and participate in the program as per normal. So we're really grateful that we're able to use Te Puia for that purpose and for their support. They were fantastic at hosting us. It also helped us to appropriately manage risk around food and things like that. We will continue to run the Noho Marae program, the Te Pū Mau program over the year, although suspending the overnight stay for the time being. We're also moving some of our training online, so last year, and we will continue to do it this year, offering our Te Reo Maori classes online. We had really good pick-up on that. We will, however, be asking our tauira, our students from Council, for their feedback on how well that's working. If we need to bring it back into the workplace, we will. But for the time being, we've had really good support for how accessible it is to do it online and via Zoom. The second thing I wanted to highlight was consultation on Te Reo Maori. So as we know, we have been an advocate for increased usage of Te Reo Maori in traffic signage, and that NZTA has some quite traditional/historic regulations around the use of English on signage. One of the first things that they have done to start changing that, and it is part of a broader program of introducing bilingual signage, is at the end of last year they began consultation on introducing an official kura sign. Now, in Rotorua, one of our kura kaupapa Māori have for probably over a decade now had permission to use a kura sign, and kura is the Māori word for school. And they've been using that on buses and so forth for a long time, and they've had permission to do that. But that has not been a national program, and so they're updating the regulations and consulting on that to try and introduce that. So we made a submission on that. We also asked that should be extended to also include stop signs. One of the things that at Council, we provide support to schools and the New Zealand Police around their road patrols, and kura kids are not allowed to use a stop sign in Te Reo Maori. And that's a real issue for them, and every year we get requests, why can't we do this? We've been able to work with the New Zealand Police to introduce Te Reo Maori signage for the uniforms, so that's been great, but still trying to get the use of a stop sign in Te Reo Maori for kura kaupapa schools to use. So we participated in a national online workshop with other councils, agencies and Te Reo Maori advocates around the prioritisation and the way in which that work program should be rolled out. And so we expect to see that happening and changes to be made, but it is a slow process. I would say, though, that NZTA have really well resourced that process, so I do expect the changes will be made in coming years. Kia ora. Are there any questions?
Kia ora. Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koe, and through you, Madam Chair, nei rā te mihi ki a koe, Gina. Actually, this is a compliment to you and the Amorangi team for inquiries that have come through to me personally from members of our communities, particularly living in many of our haukainga around our lake, and just the expediency within which you've been able to respond and address some of their concerns. I know one recent has just come through onto your table just last week. But thank you to you and the team, because I know that our whānau really appreciate that feedback. And secondly, yes, to just acknowledge the wording of kura. So I was a mother at Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Rotoiti when I went with Hawea down to get that bill passed. So I look forward to seeing the introduction of our Reo Maori signs more prominent in our district of Te Arawa. Kia ora.
Thank you. Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te chairmana, tēnā koe Gina.
Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe te pai o ngā mahi e kahakokiri ana koutou ko tō tīma. Anyway, just wanted some clarity around a few things. So I'm just looking at the new sort of structure thing. So there's the kokoe, DCE nei, and then there's another branch that comes on Rotorua Maori and Te Arawa Enablement. So do you have teams that work under those specific kaupapa, or are they sort of just kaupapa you take on as they come?
So we've always had the what is now labelled as Mātauranga Māori. So we've always had that focus on providing advice within council around Te Reo Maori, understanding a Māori worldview, incorporating that. And I want to emphasise that we don't really do. Well, we do translations, but we do a lot more work of sitting with our teams and understanding the principles and the purpose of projects, so that not just a translation, but incorporating Māori worldview and values into the project itself before we do the translation work, which has been a really important part of changing understanding or improving understanding across the organisation. So we've always had that role. The Te Arawa enablement perspective is much more outward focused, and we haven't had that role in the past, so we will be recruiting to fill that role. It's termed enablement rather than engagement, because it's much more, an engagement role tends to be more about, yes, getting information now, seeking feedback on our program as council. And that role is, yes, doing that, but also about making sure that council is responding and proactive about particularly the Te Arawa vision and finding opportunities to contribute to that.
Ka pai, ko mārama i nei, thank you. Pātai anō tāku, so just going on what Councillor Yates was talking about, Hawea, and I was also there when you made the funny about the city ride, Eke Taone, which probably shouldn't have really been put on there because he just did it as a joke, but hey, it's there now for our city ride buses. Hoi no, he kōrero anō tērā. And we're talking about these signs. These are cool little wins. These are good wins. I know I think I was the one that stirred up the hornet's nest around that kind of kōrero, but you know, it shouldn't be that hard really. For size, it shouldn't really be an issue nowadays, not for us anyway, Rotorua. So, and my kōrero was around that, my pātai is around the policy, around bilingual, tautoko te kaupapa reorua. Is there a policy in council that says, so when there's particular projects that are happening, it's actually, there's a policy there that says we will support and actively support and use the Reorua framework?
We do have Māori signage guidelines. So where for all new signs, there should be consideration to having those in both English and Te Reo Maori. And we've adopted the Te Reo Maori signage guidelines that are promoted by Te Reo. Yeah.
Does that extend to? Oh, sorry. Does that extend to projects like the Lakefront, the Pūtake Otawa, the Event Centre, Shimpack? Is that all that, or was it just road signages?
No, it's across all work programs, and so we've done a lot of work with the particular mana whenua groups for Te Pūtake Otawa, the entirety of the forest. Across a range of reserves and so forth, and so we are increasingly seeing more signage that not only has the traditional names but explanation of those names as well. So I saw on Instagram a friend who was posted a photo of signage that we had done with Ngāti Rangi Wiwihi around the traditional name of Hamurana and what that itself is a kupu mino. And so you will increasingly see that signage. We tend to work, or we always work with mana whenua to make sure that what is being shared is what they want to share.
Excellent. Kia ora.
Thank you. We've got councillors Maxwell, Kumar and then Donaldson.
Thank you. Ngā mihi o te tauhau ki a koe, Gina.
Tēnā koe.
My part is on page 31, where you gave updates provided to Te Tātou and Ngāti Whakaue re-proposed bill. This is kind of in line with even what Una spoke about, how these are working in parallel. If we get word soon that our preferred model that model is accepted with the three Maori ward and 3 general ward 1. Will that give the opportunity for any of the ones who have made an appeal or an objection to then withdraw?
I'll answer that one through you, Madam Chair.
I did say it was in parallel.
So they are two completely separate processes running in parallel. So they will take their own course. If and when we get a decision on the local bill, that will effectively make the representation review model null and void.
Okay.
And what the local bill model will then replace the representation review adopted model.
Okay, thank you. And one more part. Rawiri here ha te kupu Māori mō. Stop. Here ha te kupu Māori. Because
and that's one of the reasons why there is consultation is around dialect difference and consistency. That was one of the issues that was discussed in the workshop is getting things that are recognised universally but while still allowing for dialectal difference. So there will be consultation on that. I do know that there have been signs used by some contractors, I think Higgins in other districts, doing roadworks that use the E2 sign.
I can kind of understand why they're mataku scared to go forward, and you're helping with that dilemma, because if something goes wrong and there's a life at stake or something like that, then who's to blame?
Of course, not all drivers read English, not all drivers read, but still drive. So there are, and those of us who have driven overseas in other countries, we all know what a stop sign looks like. So that's the advocacy for Māori language advocates for introducing signage, but there will be a really slow, measured process for that.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Gina. Gina, just a couple of things that I want to talk about, mainly regarding signage. Correct me if I'm overreaching, but I see that this DC Te Reo partner is with Te Reo Partnership. And one of the things that I want to talk about the signage is, as usual, very passionate about Rotorua entranceways, and that ongoing conversation with Waka Kotahi. And the other one was, as this is with a Te Reo partnership, what are we doing? Because our rollout probably started in 2016, 2017. There were some really good words that day from Te Reo level in this very chamber, and everybody was very excited. 5 years on with COVID and not, of course, and I don't know whether it's budget constraints and all, there is a rollout, but I'm just wondering whether if there is a long-term plan so that people can see, hey, look, in 2022, this is what we're going to achieve in 2023, 24, 25, and we know exactly where we're heading in the direction. The other thing, as we are talking about this partnership, I'm just wondering, we have some of the very big businesses, and that's owned by Pukeroa, Rotorua Central Mall, and the other one is the Mitre 10 complex. So both of those, owned by a very good Maori organisation. Just wondering if they made it more culturally, like when the tourists come back as well, to say, hey, this is an entranceway into Maoridom, or just to give them the big shopping experience and spread that message across?
It's a little bit outside of council's role, but I can say that there is, whakairo, carvings and so forth, both at Trade Central and also if you look around the mall, there is Māori design elements through there. So, kia ora.
Madam Chair, through the Chair, thank you for that answer. That is a bit beyond council, but the reason I ask is because you are the link between us and Pokeroa or Te Arawa. And I thought that this conversation would be good. Like, I'd love to, if I came back from overseas, go into a mall area which was, or that how complex, told me a story.
Probably where we can contribute is that we are working with mana whenua Ngāti Whakauē and a range of entities around developing some design guidelines for the inner city. So that's across the whole of the inner city. That's a part of our district development process that JP's leading, and looking at the shape and form of the inner city going forward. So that there is an active work program working with mana whenua around how do we tell those stories, how do we reflect and elevate our shared history, and really give a sense of place. If you go to somewhere like Auckland or any city, they have a different feel, and that includes the types of buildings, the size, the scale, the density. It includes things like plantings, design features and civic spaces. So we are doing a program around that at the moment. Kia ora.
Thank you. We have Councillor Donaldson, then Mr. Waru, and we'll break for a 15-minute morning tea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Gina. Kia ora. I'm not sure if this is your kaupapa or not, but this is the first year where Matariki will be celebrated as a public holiday. And last year, along with yourself, Worship and I were privileged to go to Mokoia Island for an amazing ceremony. Constrained in numbers because of the size of the waka, which is currently in mothballs anyway. Is there any early thought with our iwi partners about something to commemorate Matariki, maybe at the lakefront or somewhere where there could be wider public participation or viewing of that?
At the end of last year, we Te Amorangi issued Matariki guidelines or guidance to across council, so that there were a number of teams within council that were looking at what they could do. So we issued some guidelines, and really the focus of the guidance is that first and foremost, we need to make sure these are authentic. So that means not just seeing it as a public holiday and picking up the idea and interpreting how we want to, but working with Te Arawa to ensure that it is something that is real, that reflects our place. And so Anita Morgan is doing a lot of work at the moment with other Te Arawa organisations to look at a process for calling ideas in, but then also how we can support the ideas that Te Arawa have for sharing the understanding, sharing the knowledge and celebrating what is the Māori New Year and a time of reflection. So it's not a new year in the sense of fireworks and parties. It's a time of reflection, of thinking about those who have passed, and really finding ways to do that in a meaningful way that acknowledges what Matariki means to us as a district.
Thank you. And final question by Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe. Thank you for your indulgence, Te Tiamana. Just on make a little comment about that Matariki thing, though, which is something we all should have a think about. We have a real opportunity here at Rotorua to own that kaupapa, a motu nei. So, I think it's something we should have a real good, deep, hard think about how we can do that in an authentic way. Hara te mea he kono he te he ahara nei engari, that hautapu, that's magical. So, we should make put our heads together and think about how we can do that and include the whole community. Hoi no, tera tera. Gina, because Uncle Chev did it, and he sort of brought in a bit of a una kōrero and a you kōrero into te wāhi kotahi, just wondering, in your role, do you have a strategy to bring about better participation by Māori in the voting, when that stuff comes along? And if not, or if you do, it doesn't matter, are you working with Una to come up with one? Kia ora.
No, I haven't, but I will be sitting down with Una and Kihi to see how we can support. I know that Una certainly is always thinking about not just raising rates generally, but also particular communities, whether that be Arohe nei, Whakapapa nei, trying to or Pakeke nei. So it's about trying to get those rates of participation up across the board, and I know that she will be thinking very much about that. So yeah, thank you for the reminder. I will be supporting that.
Tēnā koe, koutou.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much, Gina. We'll wrap it up there and have a quick morning tea break for about 15 minutes. If we could please resume our meeting at 11:25. See you then. For your patience while we take a quick break. We are now back to our operational report with our District Development Group on page 31. Over to you, JP.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for this opportunity just to talk about some highlights in my part of the operations report. So Jason has just joined me here today, and we're just really keen on making sure that through explaining to you, we're actually explaining to the community why there's so many different numbers appearing at different stages of our pipeline as we head towards getting more homes in our community. So really what I've got up there is a slide which starts to straddle the two key acts that lead towards us getting land created for subdivisions and titles through to the Building Act at the other end of that continuum where homes are built under the Building Act. So Jason and I will just step you through that, and probably most importantly too, there was an error in the report where we mentioned that third bullet point. It talked about September numbers. It was actually meant to have said the last quarter, which is more in line with the overall pictures. So continuing on from the Andrew conversation we had this morning about the good and the not so good, you can see there that we've consented year to date 174 lots. So that's and just by way of comparison, that's 64% higher than it was last year, and we've already exceeded the full year numbers for the previous financial year. So we've talked previously, and I mentioned before Christmas, as we showed you some of those subdivisions that have been coming through, we're starting to see that market response. So this continues into this financial year as a really positive shift in available subdivisions and land, which eventually we'll see homes on them. So really important for us to see that increase towards what we need across the next 10 years, which is 6,000 plus homes. So an important step up in the market. And really critically supported by my colleagues' investment in the horizontal infrastructure, stormwater, sewage, water, all of those services which must be in place to enable homes to be built. So really important activity across the whole council to support subdivisions. So yeah, very positive growth in the number of subdivisions, and we've got a couple we'll just refer to later on in this presentation. But I might just throw across to Jason now, just to do that explanation between land use consents and the subdivision consents.
Thanks, JP. Morena, and thank you, Madam Chair. Just on to the third bullet point there, and I think as JP said, just to have some clarification, because there's quite a few different numbers and what they mean. So the first two is actual subdivisions. So that's where you're creating additional titles, more parcels for people to build on. The third bullet point is additional houses consented through District Plan, Resource Management Act. So that is a resource consent, typically where we are consenting 2 or more houses on one lot. So subdivision isn't taking place, but there's additional housing. An example being that you may have seen currently under construction is the Freedom Lifestyle Village on Pukehangi Road. That's 197 houses. That is actually on the same title, so that isn't included in the subdivision numbers. So hopefully that just provides a little bit of clarification, and as JP said, that is leading to our pipeline to hopefully then transfer into new dwellings, and compliance certificates is the final piece where the house is completed and people can move into the house.
And probably just additional to that, and Jason can just clarify a bit more, when we're tracking this pipeline work through, when we're seeing people getting a building consent, so or have that, which is the fourth bullet point, getting their homes consented, it's usually within 2 years that we see the home completed. So at that point, generally we see people who have got themselves organised with their plans and hopefully their builders. The challenges we've got now is also the building supplies that go into that build. So generally within 2 years you start seeing those homes being delivered. So again, this is that important thing about us seeing an increase at the top end of our pipeline and then starting to carry that through to an increasing numbers of homes being built in response in our community.
Just to add to that, just on the building consent, the conversion rate between an actual building consent and then getting the building built is high 90%. So once somebody has actually got a building consent, they're fairly committed too, due to the investment. There's a significant more investment typically with detailed plans as part of a building consent than resource consent for an additional house.
And probably just the final point I'd make is one of the things that we've shown you when we went through the HBA was the necessity for us to see homes of 1 and 2 bedrooms built over the next sort of 10 years. So 60% really need to be in that zone. So one of the other figures we'll start bringing back to you, and as part of our monitoring requirements, is we start recording how many homes are being built in those different sizes. So we'll start reporting as well, additionally, how many are in the 1 and 2 bedroom size units, which is really important for the city. So the next couple of slides, and obviously before Christmas we reported a number of subdivisions that had occurred, and there was a few there on Pokahangi Road, one that had been purchased obviously by Kainga Ora on Collie Drive, but obviously the Freedom Village one, which also offered a different choice for homeowners. The next couple of slides I've got here just highlight some of the other housing choices that are coming through. So we've just seen consented on Rotorua Road, 2 separate owners and 2 consented subdivisions there, so approximately 49 lots on Rotorua Road across 2 landowners. So again, some might say actually we don't need lifestyle blocks. Well, actually we do. We're a growing community. People want choices of where they'd like to live, and a home is an important choice for people to make about where they live. So it's nice we've seen the infill, we've seen the redevelopment, we've seen the social and public housing development, and equally it's really important that we're seeing the growth still of those who want to move to a lifestyle type premise. So the 2 properties we've got there, and we just thought we'd pull up the maps here, both are towards the upper end of Rotorua Road. So we can probably, actually they're not quite so easy to see here, so I might just click through the 2, but heading up, well up on Rotorua Road, probably just before you start doing the bigger bend, heading back out towards the State Highway, and the second one there as well. So a couple of these have been in quite long, signalled earlier on, but the planning work has now finally come through. Jason might want to just add on that.
Yeah, just on that, the first one there is near Fleming Road, so sort of probably halfway, I imagine, and then that one's up near the top, which is 16 lots, including plantation forestry. So as JP said, things do take time. The first one, 33 lots, was signalled and was in the district plan as part of the last district plan review as Rotorua Road Vista Development, I think, plan. And a large part of that was significant nutrient reduction, so that land use change from farming into rural residential with significant planting. They've retired gullies, planting gullies, so there's quite good net benefit.
So, Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions or any other questions related to our part of the report.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Good news. When you see subdivisions of that size, though, and knowing what we put in for the infrastructure enabling fund, which I hope we get the full amount, you can see that there's infrastructure costs here. Are they met by the subdivision owner? Because that's not what we applied for up in Rotorua Road, did we?
No. Our Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application was to support the intensification plan change, which is within our urban areas, so that central and western. When you're out into a rural lifestyle space, obviously they're self-sufficient, and you also get that land use change importantly as well to bring down nitrogen. So there's probably as much calculations into the nitrogen numbers as there is to actually some of the other work.
Thank you, that's great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. JP, along the same lines, so essentially these 2 subdivisions, will they be impacted or have to comply with the offset rule? And I guess they'll have their own, as you're saying, their own water supply. They'll be basically off-grid.
Yes, that's correct.
Were there any other questions? Councillor Maxwell.
This is good news. First question, I just have 2, but first question, so access to these lots, is it going to be by State Highway 5 or the Rotorua Road one? You see that's near the top somewhere.
Yeah, it's near the top, but the access is actually off Rotorua Road with a single access in.
Yeah, so they won't be using too much of State Highway 5 then? Is what
Not direct access, no.
Okay. And the other one, what I wanted to ask was earlier on, I mean, government signalled that they wanted some relaxation of some of our rules so that people can, so this is going back probably into the urban area now, relaxation of some of the rules, distances and everything. Are we getting much inquiry for that type of area where we can be a bit more flexible with our rules?
I think you're referring back to probably our submission to the RMA amendment bill around the medium density residential standards. So we're still waiting a response from government around those, but that's, if you recall, that was the national focus of that amendment, was to try and enable through a permitted status a number of more intense development or medium density development in the urban area. So that is a relaxation of the rules because it makes some of those developments permitted. So they would only be picked up actually at the building consent stage if they comply with that medium density standard.
I drive past every now and again and it's good seeing the work going on up in Pukehangi Road there. Good progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jason and JP. JP, on page 39, the Housing Acceleration Fund, Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, say if this, because we find out by the end of April 22 if we are not, if we are successful. If we are successful, that's very good. Is there a plan B if we are not successful?
I think Her Worship touched on that. Look, what we've done is we've put in place the high-level information to enable infill and intensification in the western area of the city and the central area. If you recall, there was 2 funding applications that totalled approximately 99 million. So it was 90 million, but we've just reviewed the numbers following some requests for additional information by Kainga Ora, who's actually coordinating the decision-making around that fund. You're right, that the Plan B question is really critical. If we do not receive that full funding, it will mean we need to look really carefully at what interventions are the most effective to try and enable as much housing as possible. So that would be a challenging job for Stavros and his team to undertake. If we don't get the full funding, it will impact on our ability to see housing development travel at the speed it needs to for us to get on top of our housing demand. So it will be very challenging for us, and we've highlighted that to those people assessing it, that actually the fund is critical. And the level of funding is critical. If we start getting less than that full amount, it will be a prioritisation exercise that will leave some areas out.
Thank you. Mr Waru, followed by Councillor Rokawatake.
Tēnā koe, te amana, JP, Jason. Karawe, lovely to hear there's some developments going on here. My question is around the if you can answer, I'm not too sure, it might be too early at this stage, of what kind of homes are being flagged to be built there and what will their price range be?
No information on that. Again, we haven't had any information about or haven't at this stage seen what potential as those lots are created, what their sale prices would be. But there's some general rules of thumbs about how much people invest in a home based on their land value. So don't have the answer yet.
Oh, kapai, that's all right. I was hoping you'd say that so you can lead on a nice segue to my next pātai. So what strategy do you have in place, JP, around ensuring that, you know, I'm for local and I know there's a lot of people around the place buying up a lot of property, a lot of homes and things like that, and then they build homes that are usually too far out of reach for a lot of our own. And I'm talking about community here, not just iwi, everybody. So is there a strategy being thought about?
It is an excellent question, and you say we've talked repeatedly in here about the key here is about providing choices for people to look at. So we're doing a lot of work with philanthropics and groups like Habitat, or trying to encourage the development of further community housing providers, because apart from the affordable rentals pathway that creates, other than the public housing provided by Kaingaora, there is an opportunity then to do rent to buy, different schemes to enable people to get in. One of the things we've talked about, and it's part of that need for the 1 and 2 bedroom homes across our city, is the rule changes we're talking about on intensification drops the size of land, which reduces the price of one component. And then critically, there's a discussion about making sure 1 and 2 bedroom homes are encouraged into that space, because that becomes an affordable older person downsizing, or a younger couples or individuals trying to get into the property ladder. But we're also working and positively supporting some of the projects in Ngāti Whakaui tribal lands as an exemplar in that space. They've set aside within their subdivision some areas to try and create more affordable home options, and so that's the positive outcomes we can do there. I think probably the most important thing we can do is to make sure, and it goes back to Councillor Kumar's comment, it's about supply at this stage. If we can help the supply increase, then hopefully we'll see a reduction in the overall increases we're seeing in house prices and rents as some of that supply matches demand.
No, thank you, JP. Thank you, Jason. Just to be clear, I don't expect council to have all the answers, because nobody does at the moment. But I do hope that we have something in place to sort of encourage that good behaviour model, I suppose, more for locals. Kia ora.
Yes, absolutely, and there will be a date coming out very shortly, within the next 2 weeks, I believe, for all elected members, including Te Tātou and community boards, for us to get together and actually have an in-depth discussion on how we plan and build our way forward to meet the housing needs in this community. So that will be coming to you soon. We can have those detailed discussions then. We have a question from Councillor Rokawatake.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the intensification infilling, John Paul, and I do hope that we'll be successful and get the green light for the funding application. And you've mentioned the two areas, the western area and the CBT, and I can understand why both those areas would be looked at. But the western area, it's not an overly, how would you say, I mean, it tends to be an area where working people and so is there any sort of advance information that you might be able to give to those families who might be considering it, may have wanted to consider it for some time, and it was never going to be easy in that time, some information that what they might be up for in dollar terms, should they want to start thinking like that now? Because I think it would be very helpful for some of those families.
Councillor, you're probably just hopping a short way ahead of where we're up to, but I think the intent that you're describing is absolutely where we need to go. The Chair mentioned the workshop, and I think it really comes on the back of your request to have a meeting or a workshop after the HBA to talk about what's going to go into that intensification plan change, what's the scope, and what is our plan moving forward. I think out the back of that, as we start tying down the scope of what work we're doing over the next 6 months, we'll be in a position then to actually start communicating forward to people to say what's coming and what are the opportunities it creates. So that's again part of the communication plan. We're going to have to set very firmly around what is a massive piece or cornerstone of our long-term plan and our efforts of the council over the next sort of 6, 12, 24 months at least.
Thank you. We have Councillor Yates, followed by Ms Bray.
Tēnā kōrua, JP, kōrua ko Jason. Through you, Madam Chair. My question is around, I suppose, assistance when it comes to development of these spaces. I know that Te Tātou have been working extensively with an expert in an architect actually, who has been working with them around the modi of urban development. Have council also initiated something similar, or are you working with Te Tatau around that space?
You're talking about the wellness campus work that's been undertaken. Yes, we've met with them several times, and also the academics out of Auckland who have been assisting them with that framework. We think it's very good, and it's really valuable in identifying who we are as a community, and I think it's a good underpinning. I think moving forward, if we can make sure that as we start talking about design guides to support intensification plan changes in our district plan, there's a coming together of those two parts. So I think the intention is that there'll be a presentation at some stage to council, but we're working very closely with them about how we can assist in operationalising that.
Thank you. And Ms Spray.
Kia ora, JP. Can you tell us the lot sizes for the Rotorua Road subdivision?
This will test my eyes. A range half a hectare to a hectare, yeah, some at 1.5 hectares, so around that sort of 1 hectare, so large.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, there appear to be no other questions. That was all? Awesome. Thank you very much, JP and Jason. And now we move to our Community Wellbeing Group. We are on page 34 of our agenda for the operational report. Hello, Rob.
Kia ora tātou, Council and, Committee, and through you, Madam Chair. Rather than us all crowding around, we'll take the report as read, and we've got the team here and happy to take any questions to the particular members of our team whose area that overlaps with, so happy to hear any.
Councillor Yates, followed by Ms Rothwell.
Tēnā koe, Rob. Otira tēnā koutou. Through you, Madam Chair, a couple of compliments actually. One with regards to Safe City Guardian patrols. I've had a number of compliments around seeing them out and about in our community, especially walking down Fenton Street. So that stretch and the addition of providing safer communities has definitely been felt, also by members of that particular community as well. So neira te mihi for that. With regards to our lakefront playground, there have just extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary. I can't get over the amount of cars that are still parked up there late at night, driving across our village green, but they are there and they are utilising it. There've often been one comment that is often circulating social media is around the shade. So if you could perhaps give us a little update around that, other than me writing back and explaining to them, could you please just talk about shading there?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The playground success is great to see, and it was designed with a lot of tamariki input, and so I think it's showing the fruits of that engagement process that's with it. In the general landscape design, we've got a lot of trees, and the trees are in. We've got a very established stand of trees to the south side of the playground, or the southeast side, and some of the trees that have been put in are going to be fairly large specimens. We did consider artificial shade, but there's a significant design problem with that because of the substrate that's there. They need very big poles, and those poles need very big foundations, and that area is not a super stable area. So that was all worked through in the design process. So the trees will get up, and hopefully we'll get something there in sort of 4 to 5 years of a good quality large shaded areas. We're looking at some options in the meantime, including things like the summer umbrellas that we've put in other parks and things like that to provide some sort of opportunity. So yes, we must admit we've probably had the best January that I can remember Once we get out of the hot 2 months of the year, I think we'll be all right, and then we'll look at how we manage those peak summer periods until the trees come up.
Look, I really do appreciate that. I knew the answer, but it's just so important that we have it declared publicly, and each of us can go and share that with our constituents. Tēnā tātou.
Thank you. Ms Rothwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, Rob, I'd just like to, on behalf of the Lakes Community Board, congratulate you and the rest of the team on putting the report together in such an engaging way with all of the photographs. It was really interesting to read. Also, I thought the Wordle diagram was inspired. Just seeing those words that were prominent there was really, it told a great visual story, you know, love, wow, looks awesome, cool. They were all really prominent. I think shade was in there somewhere, but, you know, we'll wait for a few trees. There's lots of trees around. So, yeah, just a real thanks to everybody involved.
Thank you very much. Your Worship.
That lakefront is truly fantastic, and with grandchildren and the number of visitors, I've spent hours and hours and hours down there. In fact, you take a book and you lie under a big tree, and they'll call out when they need you. It's been an amazing offer, actually, when we've got other activities closed, you know, so it's been a godsend to families, and I have loved seeing the barbecues being used, the picnic blankets out there. We've never seen that. So it's something that we should be really proud of. Can't wait for the next stage, actually, and interested to see how that will link up with the village, because that's what you're asked whenever you're down there. Where to next?
Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rob, my question's around the forest loop, and congratulations on getting those last two bits completed before Christmas. So my question is around whether we are counting and monitoring the usage on there. Interested in the diversity of people using it, and I bumped into a hand cycling group that were on it the other day, riding around there, but also the management of it. So it's got its own Facebook page, it's got its own manager. Does he come under you, or is he a separate entity? How does that all work? I'm just interested in, and also the maintenance. Is it Trails Trust, or is it separately maintained by the manager?
Thank you. I'll try and remember all those. The loop has got counters on it. We've got counters on Te Tokarangi Face, and also around Putaki Otawa and Tuko Tukutuku and the concrete pathway back. So, and we've also got counters on the old Great Ride as well, back as far as Waimangu. So we should be able to determine sort of what sections are being used, and you know, how much of it's full loop and connectors and all sorts of things. When it comes to the sort of management and maintenance, the council and MB fund a Great Ride manager, whose role is to actually support and grow the ride, and we're using a lot of help through Rotorua Economic Development, who've been helping us with the Facebook pages and marketing, and working with partners for how we can add value to, you know, to a excursion on this day ride. We've had that position filled. We've just actually got a vacancy just turned up for that, but we'll be looking to refill that, maybe with a slightly different focus, because we are switching now that it's sort of built and it's set up and we've got a marketing support base going, as to then focusing on the maintenance and what improvements we can make, because all great rides have multiple improvements as they develop over time, and we are working with Rotorua Trails Trust as our contractor to do that maintenance work.
Thank you. We'll go Councillor Kumar, Councillor Rokauatate, and then Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Rob. Rob, just got a couple of questions. One is regarding animal control. I see in this report there were some minor problems, but how do we explain to the Aucklanders mainly that are coming into Rotorua and they have a license to take their dogs out to the cafes and all, whereas we have a district bylaw that prohibits that? How do we tell them and still want them to come into our city? And the other issue is, well, not an issue, is have there been any, and I know everyone's speaking very positively about the lakefront, and I've got nothing negative to say, but I'm just wondering, just hearing from a few people the long slide, was there any safety issues regarding that when they were coming down? A lot of the kids said that they did feel burnt and hurt themselves. So a couple of ladies came on separate occasions just to talk to me about it. One did talk about some sitting areas more than the shades, is if they were watching the mokapunas, there wasn't enough sitting for them.
Thank you. If I'll take the second question first, and then we can pass the animal control one to Kurt. The slide was tested because if it's it was designed, and then the final part of the slide was tested because if it's too long, people stop in the slide and get banged into by others coming down. If it's too short, they fly out the end and hurt themselves in the bark and stuff like that. So there was a little bit of testing to get that sorted out. We haven't heard too much about any issues with it. It does have a little bit of static that gets built up, but there's some earthing, things like that. There's always refinements to be made. The slide will get slipperier with use. It'll become a little more speedy and less friction. So those sorts of things will develop. But I mean, they're all part of standard playground design, manufacturing, and we've had everything. All that playground has been audited by a New Zealand playground auditor and everything like that. So a lot of work goes into the design and getting it right, but there's always tweaks that can happen later on. And through to Kurt for the dog question.
Morena, and through you, Madam Chair, I think the answer to that question about approaching the visitors is that it is all about approach. So for many years, the animal control team have had to proactively, where they can, and reactively educate visitors to particularly the CBD. So they do it in a way that they are also trying to educate the visitors from out of town about where they can take their dogs as well. And I would have to say, in general, most of them are met with a fairly okay response or understanding response from who they deal with.
Thank you. Councillor Rokauatate.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just absolutely so pleased that this council decided to press ahead with the lakefront development and also the aquatic centre. Can you imagine had we heeded the advice from some councillors or the comments from some councillors, we would really be looking at a retirement village now rather than the beautiful young family city that we're certainly working on. So I'm pleased that we held the line on that. However, I just want to ask about because I've stayed in town over the whole summer period, and it's around the safety issues in the city. And to me, it seems that things have been going okay there. So I just wondered, are you able to give some feedback to say that there hasn't been, in the past couple of years, we've had quite a bit of, I suppose you could say, quite visible, I was going to say antisocial behaviour, but I'm just wondering how our safety in the CBD and safety in the city has panned out over these last 6 weeks or so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You are correct in what you've observed. I think this summer, and despite the high numbers of people that we have had out and about, for all intents and purposes has been relatively similar to other years, which is really good. And I think a lot of that too is with the extra presence from our own staff along with the commitment from the police. You may notice down Fenton Street at the moment the police have their mobile police station down there as well to also increase that visibility, make it easier for people to access and to ask any questions, as well as providing a drop-in point for our guardians and for that connectedness in our partnership as well. So I think we haven't really seen anything too out of the ordinary, except for a couple of house fires, or a couple of fires rather. But other than that, no, it has been a relatively normal, dare I say it, summer period.
Thank you. And final question to Councillor Yates.
It's a comment in this regard to Te Maori and in particular to Laura and Rangitihi, who assisted with the handing over of Te Pātaka Pūrākau o Te Arawa, which is hugely significant, which was a legacy piece left by Ngāpu Manawa e Waru, capturing 60 stories. So Laura, to you and the team that assisted with that handover, congratulations. Look forward to seeing these stories growing across our community, because it's a huge resource for our schools and it's a huge resource for many who have actually gone to that particular website to learn more about Rotorua, who we are as people in our place. And then the final one also to Stuart, it's great. I'm loving seeing the wooden structures being put in place at Sir Howard Morrison Performing Arts Centre. So bring on October, I say. Kia ora koutou.
Thank you very much. And on that note, congratulations to Te Maori too for the very innovative approach of the click and collect service, which allows everyone to still be able to collect their books. And interestingly, even with the challenges of COVID, the issues have been up. We've had over 100,000 issues of books in the last 3 months at the Te Maori Library. So congratulations and keep up the good work. So there are no further questions. Thank you very much to the team at the Community Wellbeing Group. Cheers. That concludes our public section of the operational report. I now need a resolution to go into public excluded, and I'll just advise that there are 2 items for consideration in our public excluded session, lakefront development update and COVID-19 update. And the reasons for going into confidential are due to commercial sensitivity and to enable commercial and industrial negotiations. I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the committee move into public excluded session. Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Councillor Raukawa-Tate. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. And we'll just give a minute to switch over.